When you think of the most powerful people in the world, chances are you imagine presidents, billionaires, or world leaders who command armies and corporations. But what if I told you that one of the most influential men alive is someone you rarely see in the spotlight, someone whose name you've probably heard, but whose story you don't really know? His name is Larry Page, the quiet genius who co-founded Google, a company that has transformed not just the internet, but the way billions of people live their everyday lives. So, have you heard of Larry Page? You might know him as the Google guy, but his story goes much deeper than search engines. It's a tale of brilliance, ambition, secrecy, and a vision for the future that is almost sci-fi. Larry Page may not be as loud or controversial as Elon Musk or as public as Jeff Bezos, but his fingerprints are everywhere in the digital world. Let's start at the beginning. Larry Page was born in 1973 in East Lansing, Michigan. He grew up in a home surrounded by technology. His father, Carl Page, was one of the pioneers of computer science and earned a PhD in the subject back when very few people even knew what computers could do. His mother, Gloria, taught computer programming. That meant Larry wasn't just raised around books and toys. He was raised around computers, gadgets, and the belief that technology could change the world. He once said that by the time he was a child, their house was like a mess of computers and science equipment everywhere. For most kids, playtime meant board games. For Larry, it meant tinkering with machines. This background shaped him in a profound way. By the time he was in elementary school, Larry had already developed a fascination with how things worked. He loved taking apart gadgets just to see how they were built. He wasn't afraid of breaking them. He was more interested in the hidden mechanics inside. That curiosity would later fuel the invention that turned him into a billionaire. Fast forward to the 1990s. Larry Page was studying computer engineering at Stanford University, and it was here that fate introduced him to another brilliant student, Sergey Brin. At first, they didn't get along. Sergey found Larry a bit stubborn, and Larry thought Sergey was argumentative. But as often happens with great partnerships, their disagreements fueled collaboration. Together, they decided to tackle one of the biggest problems of the early internet: how to organize the flood of information going online. Back then, search engines were clunky and unreliable. They simply matched keywords without really understanding which results were the most useful. Larry and Sergey had a radical idea. What if you could rank websites the way academic papers are ranked, by citations and references? In other words, a website linked to by many other websites must be more important. Larry developed a system called PageRank, named after himself, not just web pages. That idea became the backbone of what we now know as Google. Think about that for a moment. Two graduate students, working out of dorm rooms with borrowed servers, built a system that would go on to shape how billions of people access knowledge every single day. When they first launched Google in 1998, it wasn't flashy, it didn't have banners or ads, it was just a plain white page with a simple search bar. But it worked better than anything else, and that's why people loved it. Within a few years, Google wasn't just another search engine, it was the search engine. Of course, Larry Page wasn't just an inventor, he was also a visionary businessman. Along with Sergey Brin and their early CEO, Eric Schmidt, Larry turned Google from a scrappy startup into one of the most valuable companies in history. Today, Google's parent company, Alphabet, is worth over $1.8 trillion. For context, that makes it more valuable than the GDP of countries like Canada, South Korea, or Spain. And Larry Page, who owns about 6% of Alphabet, has a personal fortune of around $120 billion. That puts him consistently among the top 10 richest people in the world. But here's the fascinating part. Unlike some billionaires who love the spotlight, Larry Page is notoriously private. He doesn't give many interviews. He rarely makes public appearances. In fact, in recent years, he's almost disappeared from the public eye altogether. For someone who helped build the most powerful information company on Earth, he himself is something of a mystery. So what does he do with all that money and power? The answer might surprise you. Larry Page is obsessed with the future, particularly radical ideas that sound impossible to most people. He has poured billions into projects that feel more like science fiction than business. Take flying cars. Yes, flying cars. While most automakers are still trying to perfect electric vehicles, Larry Page secretly funded two startups, Kitty Hawk and Opener, that are working on personal flying machines. The idea is to revolutionize transportation, making cars that can lift off vertically like a drone and fly over traffic. For Larry, this isn't a crazy fantasy, it's a logical next step. Then there's healthcare. Through Alphabet's research arm, Calico, Larry has been funding efforts to extend human lifespan. That's right, he's investing in longevity research, trying to crack the biological code of aging. Imagine if people could live not just to 80 or 90, but to 120 or 150 in good health. That's the kind of moonshot Larry Page is quietly bankrolling. And of course, there's AI. Long before ChatGPT and today's AI hype, Google under Larry Page acquired DeepMind, a London-based artificial intelligence company, for around $500 million in 2014. At the time, most people had never heard of it. But DeepMind has since made breakthroughs like AlphaGo, the program that defeated the world champion at the ancient game of Go, something many thought was decades away. Larry Page saw it coming and invested early. What's fascinating about Larry Page's vision is that he doesn't think small. He once said that if you want to make a big impact, you should aim for projects that are 10 times better than what exists, not just 10% better. He calls this philosophy 10 times thinking. And it explains why Google has ventured into everything from self-driving cars, Waymo, to balloon-powered internet, Project Loon. Larry Page is not satisfied with incremental change. He wants to reshape entire industries. Of course, with great ambition comes great criticism. Some argue that under Larry's leadership, Google became too powerful, too controlling, and too invasive of privacy. The company's dominance in search, advertising, and data has drawn lawsuits and government investigations worldwide. Others worry that projects like AI could be dangerous if developed recklessly. Even within Google, employees have protested against contracts with the military or the handling of sensitive technologies. Larry Page, however, has often stayed silent, preferring to let the work speak for itself. But maybe that's part of his genius. Unlike showman CEOs who thrive on attention, Larry Page is the opposite, a visionary who works in the background, shaping the future while avoiding the noise. He doesn't need to tweet daily or appear on magazine covers to prove his influence. Google itself is proof enough. Every time you type a question into a search bar, use Google Maps to find your way, or watch a video on YouTube, you are living inside Larry Page's vision. And perhaps that's the most remarkable thing about him. Larry Page has already achieved what most innovators only dream of. He has changed the way humans interact with knowledge. Think about it. Before Google, finding information meant libraries, encyclopedias, or asking around. Now we have an infinite library in our pockets, instantly accessible. That shift has transformed education, business, culture, and even politics. And it all started with Larry Page's idea of ranking web pages differently. Today, Larry Page spends much of his time away from the public eye. Reports suggest he has been living in places like Fiji, focusing on his family and personal projects. He rarely speaks in public, but when he does, he often talks about the long term, what the world will look like not in 5 years, but in 50. And while other billionaires chase headlines, Larry seems content to chase the future quietly. So, have you heard of Larry Page? Chances are you've used his invention every single day without even thinking about it. You've relied on Google for directions, knowledge, entertainment, and answers. His influence is so deeply woven into modern life that it's almost invisible. But make no mistake, Larry Page is one of the most important figures of our time. He's a dreamer, a builder, and a man whose ideas have reshaped the digital age. In the end, Larry Page proves something extraordinary. You don't need to be loud to change the world. Sometimes the most powerful people are the ones working quietly behind the scenes, turning radical ideas into everyday realities. And if his track record is anything to go by, the future Larry Page is building is going to be unlike anything we've ever seen before.